What's up, everyone? This is Lucas Ross Sports, and it is time for the AP Top 25 poll update after week number 3 and heading into week 4 of the 2022 college football season. Week number 3 was, a little bit of a quiet week for the top 25 teams. Of course, some top 25 teams were beat, some are close to getting beat. You had Florida barely surviving against South Florida. You had, Michigan State losing to Washington. Michigan State is not in this top 25, and that's pretty much the only change that really happened in this top 25 poll. The top 5 is pretty much the same. The top 5 teams dominated this weekend. Then Clemson is, their offense is not really good right now, but it's just getting better. And we're starting to get to know more about these teams as we're into this season. We're getting close to figure out what these teams are like, how they play, and all that. So let's get right into the AP Top 25 poll update here. These rankings came out yesterday after the week 3 was complete. And we begin from 21 through 25. Miami back to number 25, or I should say all the way down to number 25. Lost to Texas A&M on the road. Tell you what, Miami's offense struggled in this game. They could not move the ball on the Texas A&M defense. Pretty much this game right here, I expected it a defensive battle. I thought Miami would come out victorious in this game, but honestly, this Miami offense just did not look good. And the Texas A&M Aggies, they dominated that game. The defense dominated that game, and that's what happened there for Miami to move down to number 25. And Miami's schedule kind of gets a little bit tougher. They do still have to play all those Coastal Division teams, but I think the ACC is pretty much wide open this year. And now with Miami losing, and now, of course, their rival Pittsburgh here at number 24. Of course, they lost to Tennessee last week, but they redeemed themselves. But the game against Western Michigan, it was not an easy task for Pittsburgh. This team, lost their starting quarterback, from last week's game to Tennessee. And now Pittsburgh is kind of in a, do or die situation. They have to, beat all those Coastal Division teams in order to, get to the ACC championship. But I don't think Pittsburgh and Miami are the teams to beat. I think Clemson pretty much is the team to beat, but the ACC is wide open. Texas A&M at number 23, they move up a spot. I really am surprised that Texas A&M is ranked number 23 and not a higher ranking, but I think I understand why they put them at number 23. Maybe that Appalachian State loss is still in their heads a little bit, and they probably should not move Texas A&M up in the rankings. But Texas A&M coming off that big win against Miami, that's a big win there. You get a good win there, and also you still got a chance to have a really good rest of the year. But they have to play Arkansas this weekend. That is going to be a great matchup there. Arkansas is 3-0 on the year. Texas A&M could wind up being, beaten in that game, but it's a revenge game for Texas A&M from last year. Number 22 is Texas. Texas moves down a spot after the close win over UTSA, and I can see them, I can see why they put Texas down at one spot, is because that game against UTSA was a lot tougher. And don't get me wrong, UTSA is a great team. That's why Texas moved down a spot. And I knew Texas going into the weekend, they would have a pretty tough non-conference matchup. I still think this Texas team is good to where they were against Alabama. That defense is pretty solid. And I think the defense is going to pretty much step up in the Big 12. But right now, the Big 12 leader is Oklahoma. They are pretty much the dominant team right now in the Big 12. Number 21, Wake Forest. They are 3-0. With a Sam Hartman back at quarterback, it's pretty good news for them considering they play Clemson this weekend. And that's going to be a big matchup there out of the ACC. Wake Forest versus Clemson. Good news is in this one, Wake Forest gets Clemson at home. It's a potential upset alert type game. It's going to be a good one. Sam Hartman and going up against this Clemson defense. Clemson's defense has played pretty well in the first, 3 weeks, but their offense just is kind of sloppy a little bit. I think they'll get better, though. It just takes time for the offenses to get better until we get into the month of October. Let's go now from 16 through 20. Florida at 2-1. They're number 20. They moved down 2 spots after the win over South Florida, and they only won that game by 3. They had to come back from behind in that game, and also they had a game-winning touchdown, and that's the second time that Florida has done that this year. Remember, they first did it against Utah, and now they did it against South Florida. Tough matchup this weekend against Tennessee on the road. That is going to be a good one, and that's where College Game Day is going to be held at this weekend. So it should be a really good game on CBS. That game is, I believe, 3:30 p.m., so big game there for Florida this weekend. Number 19, BYU. They lose to Oregon this weekend. Tell you what, BYU got blown out in this game. You know, Oregon's offense was just really explosive. Defensively, Oregon's defense came to play. I think Oregon had their A game on. You know, like I said, with all these teams, if they bring their A game, they're going to win the game no matter what. And Oregon just brought it there. I think Oregon pretty much played their best football so far on the year. And that happened to be against BYU, which was a dangerous team and also a veteran BYU team. But BYU moves down in the rankings to number 19. They were at number 12 the previous week. How about Washington, number 18 on this list after an upset win over Michigan State? Pretty much I saw this coming here. I knew Washington could potentially pull off an upset against Michigan State, and they did it. So they are number 18 in the AP poll, so they're a new addition to the AP poll. Washington kind of ranked, I believe, for the first time in a while, so they're pretty much a Pac-12 contender. Don't sleep on that Washington team. They are 3-0. Baylor at 2-1. Number 17. They remain number 17. This is where they were last week as well. And Baylor has a tough matchup against Iowa State coming up this weekend. And Iowa State is 3-0. So, I mean, they could potentially lose that game. Remember, they lost that game to BYU on the road. And they got Iowa State on the road. So they could potentially lose that game. And that's a potential upset alert type game as well, probably for this week. Ole Miss at number 16. Shutting out Georgia Tech on the road. Big win there for Lane Kiffin's squad. We're starting to see this Ole Miss team kind of pick it up on offense and get really used to this, you know, new offensive young team a little bit. I think Ole Miss has got a chance to still be really good for the rest of the year. I mean, the thing is, Ole Miss doesn't really have a lot of challenges along the way. I mean, I think they have to play Kentucky out of the East, you know, coming up this year. But that's the only tough game, I think, out of the East for Ole Miss. I think they can still win maybe 10 games this year. But, you know, Ole Miss right now, they're 3-0. They're looking pretty good. Let's go to 11 through 15 now. That's Oregon. Oregon at number 15 after the win over BYU at home. Oregon looked pretty good in this game. Their offense looked much better than the Georgia game and also the previous game as well. Oregon now sitting at 2-1. They're back in the top 15. You know, Oregon, I'm really surprised they moved up this many spots after the win. But, you know, it's against a good BYU team that were ranked number 12 last week. They're entering, you know, this weekend as well. But Oregon right now at number 15, I think they'll get better. They're pretty much still a Pac-12 contender. Don't really sleep on them. How about Penn State at number 14? Penn State ranked last week 22nd. They move up to number 14. They blowed out the Tigers of Auburn on the road this week, you know, on the weekend. They are now 3-0. And I kind of, you know, doubted this Penn State team a lot. You know, they're getting better as a team as well. And previously when they got that win over Purdue early in the year, I thought this team would still not be all that good, but instead they have shown that they are still a Big Ten East contender. Like I said, Big Ten East is now wide open this year. I think it's going to be really wide open after this, you know, Penn State win on the road at Auburn. Don't sleep on the Nittany Lions. Utah at number 13. Don't really sleep on this Utah team. I'm not giving my hopes up on them either. I think they still are a college football playoff type team, even though they lost to Florida early in the year. But they picked up some really good couple wins, and they got a tough matchup this weekend, though. But I think they have a chance to really knock off, you know, who they're playing. I believe it's Arizona State, I believe they're playing. So, yeah, they have a chance to knock that one off. And also, Arizona State fired their head coach. I'll probably make a video on that probably tomorrow about Herm Edwards, the head coach of Arizona State that has been fired. Number 12 is NC State. NC State being close back into the top 10. They've beaten Texas Tech there in that game. And honestly, I thought Texas Tech had a chance to maybe win this game, but NC State, they proved that they are still an ACC contender and also pretty much almost one of those top teams out of the Atlantic Division. So NC State remains at number 12. Tennessee at number 11. They move up in the rankings after a win over Akron. They get a pretty easy win there. They scored 63 points in that game. Not much to talk about Tennessee in this one. other than they play Florida this weekend, and it's pretty much going to be a good matchup. And pretty much, College Game Day is going to Knoxville for the first time since 2016 when Tennessee was still in their prime. So Tennessee at number 11. Let's go to 6 through 10 now. Arkansas at number 10. They remained number 10 after a win over Missouri State. That game proved to be not even easier than it expected. I mean, Bobby Petrino was down there at Missouri State, returned at Arkansas, pretty much almost, pulled off a big win there. Arkansas has a tough matchup this weekend. I think it's probably their biggest test of this weekend, or by far the season so far. That's Texas A&M, and that game is at Arlington. So really stay tuned for that game. That's going to be a good one there between those two top 25 teams. Oklahoma State at number 9. Oklahoma State number 9, 3-0. Pretty much Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are pretty much the top Big 12 teams right now. Maybe Baylor as well, but they're 2-1. So Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are pretty much the top Big 12 teams right now in the Big 12 Conference. Oklahoma State, not a lot to talk about them other than they are 3-0 and off to a pretty good start. Kentucky at number 8. They move up a spot after being at number 9 last week. Kentucky is off to a 3-0 start. They're pretty high on this Kentucky team, and they don't really have a big challenge this week. They still have, wait a while before they play their next SEC game, and that is, of course, Ole Miss on the road, and that game is in October. So Kentucky, we're starting to learn about them a little bit, what the offense is like, and also the defense, but Kentucky's off to a great start. They're 3-0. I'm really impressed with what they've done so far. USC at number 7, another dominating win this past weekend, and also, they're just scoring more points after points. So not a lot to talk about this USC team. I mean, they're pretty much, a Pac-12 contender and pretty much, a college football playoff contender perhaps. And, if they can get that quarterback going as well as the offense, if this team stays explosive on the offensive side of the ball, this USC team is going to be dangerous. Speaking of dangerous, how about this Oklahoma team? Dominating win against Nebraska on the road. Of course, Nebraska fired their head coach, Scott Frost, but Oklahoma, they dominated that game. This is, like I said in my offseason, this Oklahoma team still has the talent on both sides of the ball. I didn't think offensively they would be a little bit, good at all. But, Oklahoma, they had Dylan Gabriel at quarterback. He's off to a pretty good start on the year. And, you got the offense and the defense. This defense looked pretty good against Nebraska. So Oklahoma, I think, is pretty much a playoff contender as well. They're one of those top 6 playoff contenders. And I won't count out USC either. But what a start these two teams have had on offense. And here's the top 5, 1 through 5, pretty much the same teams. Clemson, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia. Clemson, like I said, their offense is a little bit sloppy throughout the first 3 weeks, but this offense should really get better by the end of the year. But they had to play Wake Forest on the road. Going to be a tough matchup there on the road at Wake Forest. I think they can win it there, but it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tough one if Clemson loses that game. I mean, pretty much their playoff hopes could be over, but with a 1 loss, you don't really have to worry about it. They'll be pretty much out of the top 5. But like I said, Clemson is still a playoff contender in my opinion. Michigan at number 4. Michigan's offense is rolling in the first 3 weeks. How about 50 points in 3 straight weeks? You do it over Hawaii, another great team, and also another UConn team. So, I mean, Michigan has scored a lot of points so far on the year. This is one of the top offenses right now in the Big Ten, maybe compared to Ohio State, but Michigan, their offense is rolling. Not much to talk about them, but they play Maryland this weekend, and that could be an offensive game right there between those two teams. Maryland is also 3-0. Ohio State at number 3, just talked about them. Pretty much still the top offense in the Big Ten East. And also, they are coming off 77 points against Toledo on that weekend. So, Ohio State's offense proved to be dangerous that day, but it also was against Toledo. So, not a lot of, things to talk about for Ohio State. They play Wisconsin this weekend. It's going to be a really good one there, but, I think Ohio State will take care of business in that game. Wisconsin's off to a pretty slow start. Alabama at number 2, 60 points in their game against UL Monroe. They redeemed themselves after only scoring 20 against Texas. Alabama plays Vanderbilt this weekend. Going to be their first SEC test, but that's a game they should take care of business in. They have no business in losing that game. I still think Vanderbilt is one of the worst teams in the SEC, even though they're off to a 3-1 start, but they're coming off that loss to Wake Forest, so that would be a bigger challenge for Vanderbilt instead of Alabama. Georgia proved their dominance this weekend against South Carolina on the road. Pretty much Georgia is the team to beat this year, not Alabama. Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, those are teams that, teams can beat, but Georgia is the team to beat this year. They prove how dominant they are in the first 3 weeks. That blowout win against Oregon and, that blowout win against South Carolina. So Georgia, not a lot to talk about them other than they played really good against South Carolina on the road. So Georgia doesn't really have a tough challenge this weekend. They get a cupcake game this weekend against Kent State, so Georgia gets a break from that. But that concludes the AP Top 25 poll. Do I disagree on some things? I don't really disagree with the rankings at all this weekend. I think they're pretty much accurate as well. So Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, and Clemson are the top 5 teams. And that concludes the AP Top 25 video for this weekend after week number 3 and heading into week number 4. I think week 4 is going to be wide open as well, but, also stay tuned here for more on the Lucas Ross Sports channel.